Welcome to the struggle. Welcome to the struggle. This is dedication.
All right, so a bit of an introduction. Welcome to the Since You Asked podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and this podcast is made to acknowledge certain topics in society nowadays that we typically avoid talking about. And today we live in a society where we don't know necessarily what is true, and we are so divided as people that I get something from an internet search that you might not get based on my individual points of view, but also geographic location and whatever. So this podcast will just say fuck that to all of that, so we can talk about what actually matters. Just the other day, to dive straight in, I was walking in the street of Odense here in Denmark, and a group of guys, I would guess they are 16 till 18 years old, stopped me to ask if I could help them with a survey they were doing for their studies. And I was like, yeah, sure, okay, let me just spend 5 minutes asking some questions. And then I did that with just one of the guys. And afterwards, he said, thank you very much. Like, genuinely looked at me and thanked me. And I was like, well, of course. It was like 5 minutes. And he said, yeah, but nobody has helped us so far. Nobody even stopped to say politely no. They just kept on moving. And that reminded me why I believe this podcast and certain other, various media is so important nowadays, that we are afraid to step on anybody's toes and we are afraid to get embarrassed ourselves because of we might look stupid and whatever. So I just got reminded why I wanted to do this in the first place. And this is the very first episode that we're going to do it. The format might change. I might invite people to join me, people who are smarter than me, people who know stuff that I don't. It'll be about topics that I find interesting, but it could also be about topics that I don't even know about yet that might relate to the certain field, which overviewingly would be mental health and being young today. So I might speak a lot about young men. That doesn't mean that none of the women would be able to get anything from this. It's just because it's based mainly of my own expectations and on my own experiences throughout my life. So that's the overall arching idea of Since You Asked the podcast. I'll start by introducing myself a little bit for those of you who don't know out there. My name is Alex. As for counting this day, I'm 29. I am from Denmark, from Odense, which is the third biggest city in Denmark. I have moved around a lot, but now I'm back here. In my early days, I was probably the most shy kid you could ever get. I couldn't look people in the eye. I couldn't speak with strangers. When I was done with the elementary school, I think I was 14 years old, 15 years old, I was deemed not ready to move on to the next level of education in Denmark. Not because my grades were not good, because they were all right, but simply because I was not aware enough of how to be a guy in society. So they threw me onto a 10th grade add-on where the main target was to get a little bit out of my comfort zone. It didn't really matter what grades I got in physics or math or whatever. So that really actually helped me. I got to redefine who I wanted to be. But what I also got was a year where I built up some kind of, I would say, confidence. But later on, I realized it was just arrogance. Like, it was a facade. It wasn't really who I wanted to be, but it was better than being nobody, which was what I was before. But that led me to the high school, or what we call gymnasium in Denmark, where all of a sudden this year that I have spent building this facade, this persona that I actually wasn't, that didn't work at a gymnasium with so many more people and a lot of youth, a lot of different people who are also confused about who they are. I couldn't be myself there either, or the version I thought was myself. So I spent 3 years in hell trying to develop who I actually was. And I was known on this gymnasium as the arrogant guy because I didn't talk to anybody. I spent the time with myself, and this was just a facade because I was insecure. So yeah, I spent 3 years in hell in the gymnasium where I didn't know who I was. And this actually panned out in such a horrible way that I was staying out of school. All of a sudden, I woke up one morning uh, not feeling any kind of motivation to go to school. This all was also happening while I was living at home with my mom. And she and I didn't get along in this specific time of period either. I actually ran away in this time. So I stayed at a friend's couch when I was 17. And I woke up one morning thinking, why do I want to go to school? There's literally no reason. I don't want to study anything afterwards. I don't want to, I don't know if I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever everybody else wanted to be. So I woke up without any purpose. And that scared me because the feeling quickly went from, I don't know why I want to go to school to, I don't know why I want to wake up today. And that's a scary feeling of, you know, self-worth, or the opposite of. I suppose I have never had suicidal thoughts in any way, but I suppose that's where it starts, that you don't have a reason in your mind to wake up. So I told my mom this, even though we were not on the same level of mindset in this specific area. I told her everything, and she brought me to the doctor where I told him everything. And he said, okay, you need to go to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist. And I went through some questionnaire where I got points that in the end told me that I was severely depressed. And I asked the doctor, I don't remember all of this so specifically. I think my brain is trying to help me not remember much, but I do remember this. Asking the doctor, then what? What do we do? And his solution was a pill. You can take this pill, and then it won't make you happier. It won't work in that way, but it might numb you out so you don't feel this way as much. And I know my mom, so I could just feel her without looking at her being like, no, that's not what we're going to do. And that was also my own value. That was also my own opinion. A pill cannot be the way for a 17-year-old guy to live his life from now on. So we declined and went home to look for different ways. My mom had her ideas. I went online for my ideas. I went to YouTube where I literally just typed in how to get purpose, how to get confidence. And then I found there were influencers. And bear in mind, this is 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So it's before the term influencer became famous, at least here in Denmark. But there were some influencers speaking about how to get more confidence, how to style yourself better, how to behave a certain way so that you can maybe get a little bit more confidence in the everyday life. And I just absorbed all of it. I spent my entire time on YouTube. Whatever people did in school, I did not do in school because I was just on YouTube watching these guys. Everything from top 10 things you need to wear to look this way to actually videos where they approach strangers on the street asking for random things that their comment section might have suggested or whatever it might be. And I was looking at it. They were doing things, either they were dressed a certain way or just speaking in a certain way where I was like, how the fuck do you become that way that you have the guts to do so? And the only way I could see, and they also said that I needed to do this, was to copy it. Do as they did. So when the video said, hey, you need to go up to this random person and do 10 push-ups in the middle of the street, I did that. And I took all these things, all these random ass dares, or whatever you can call it, and I did that for 5 years, maybe, with a bunch of friends, because I found out I wasn't the only one. So I showed these videos to some of the guys I was talking to, and they kind of had the idea that maybe I could use this too. So I think we were somewhere between 5 and 8 guys, not always the same people, but interacting and intertwined between studies and friend lists, who were looking at these videos, literally just sitting down with our phones or whatever, taking notes like, oh, he's doing this, he's doing that. Okay. And then we would, because this was the time where we just got 18, which is the age in Denmark where you can go out and drinking. So we went to the bars where we knew people, and I spent Thursday, Friday, Saturday going out, drinking, which I'm not recommending you do. It was fun. But I went out maybe 3 days a week for years where I did this. And I would literally have my own list of dares that we wrote down ourselves, put them in a hat. And I know this sounds stupid, but we did this physically. We put it in a hat that we brought into the bar, into the club. And then each guy took their turn taking something up, like a dare. And then it would say, find 2 girls and make them guess if you're a gay or whatever. And if you didn't do it, you had to buy shots for the guys. And bear in mind, we didn't have any money, so we didn't want to spend it on alcohol. So yeah, you could either do this stupid thing, which would make you feel embarrassed and awkward, or you could, spend all your money, which was also stupid. And that's how we did it for years in a row, like on and on and on. And these things obviously developed into more and more things. And all of a sudden, I found out, even if I look stupid, even if I feel embarrassed or awkward right now, nothing changed. Yeah. Somebody might have laughed at me. And they might have went to their friend or girlfriend or whatever and say, this guy is fucking awkward. That's fair and square. But I'm still here. I still have my guys. There's still water in the faucet. Trees are outside. Nothing changed. Nobody died. And the more I got this feeling and just kept on doing it, like repetition, the more I realized within myself that whoever I was before this was someone I made myself. Maybe not voluntarily and knowingly, because we're just brought up by people like parents and friends, and then circumstances if you're brought up in a poor family, in a poor neighborhood or whatever. But you are doing this to yourself. I found that out the hard way. But that also meant a good thing, because it meant that I could do the exact opposite. If I was the reason for my behavior and the way I was thinking today, I could also change that. I could be the reason for the other behavior. So I started changing that, spent a lot of years doing this random shit, lost some friends, gained some new ones, and then I started working in the nightlife industry because I was at the bar so many times a week that everybody got to know me. I knew all the bartenders, I knew the owner and whatever. And I applied for a job and I got rejected, and I applied for the job again and I got rejected. And after a few times, I was called in for the job interview. And then he said to me, hey, I'm not saying there is a job, but I'm just now opening up for interviews. And I said, oh, it doesn't really matter, because if I don't get this job this time around, I won't be mad at you. But there'll be a new application tomorrow, because I'm going to try again. And this mindset of mine of trying again wasn't something that came naturally either. But he laughed at me, the venue manager, and I got the job. I asked to be the bartender, because that's the cool thing to do. And I was hired as a runner, which is, well, at least at the time in this establishment, not the cool thing to do. Later on in my life, I have learned now that the runners of the venues, like clubs and bars, those are the real heroes. Not that being a bartender or a host or whatever isn't being a hero either. But if you know the nightlife industry or the service industry, you know that those guys running around, those are pulling their their weight. So I got to do that, and believe it or not, I had 3 shifts tops as a runner. And I went to the manager, and I didn't cry, but I whined about how tough it was, and I hurt my hand, and this wasn't really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be in the bar, and he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I will put you in the identification scanner window," which was a thing at this time. It wasn't the wardrobe, and it wasn't as a doorman or security anyway. I was sitting in a window that is I had no more space than I have on this chair right now. Literally just looking at everybody's identification walking in. And I did that for 1.5 years maybe. It didn't make me look any cooler. I got to know a lot of people because I literally greeted everyone walking in. But after a certain time, I got a little bit more confident in myself, and I gained the balls to ask the manager one more time, hey, I've been doing this for some time now. Can we maybe, develop me into the bartender where I thought, help a little bit more, but I meant be the cool guy. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what? I think I have room for you in the wardrobe now." So I went to the wardrobe. And long story short, I worked there for maybe a year before then being asked actually if I want more responsibility within the bar itself, behind the scenes. I was asked if I wanted to lead a small group of people who were seen as the marketing guys, the people who knew everybody coming in so they could sell the tables, they could sell the beverages. And I was a part of this team already just because I wanted to be a part of more. And the guy who was supposed to be ahead of it got promoted into another position, which meant they wanted to find someone new. So they asked me. And I immediately just jumped at it. I didn't even ask for what the salary was or whatever because I was just stupid. But I jumped at it. And for half a year, I led that team while at the same time maybe getting one shift as a bartender. And then the guy who was before me was hired as the venue manager of a nightclub within the same city. And he didn't last long there because of some internal struggles or whatever. But that made the position be open. And I always went to the manager and say, I want more, give me more responsibility, give me more things to do. And all of a sudden they asked me, hey, okay, you sure you want this? Because it will require you to come to this other bar first to be taught how to be the venue manager for a certain amount of time. You'll be removed from all the people you know, all the people you care about here in this establishment, put into a group of people who are older than you are, for only to be there for 3 months being taught everything, for then to become the manager of a third establishment where you don't know anyone. And I'm the kind of guy, or at least I try to be as often as possible, that when I say A, I want to do this, I also say B, I'm going to do it, no matter what the actual A is. So I said, yes, I want to be a venue manager. And then they presented me with this option. So I had to say, sure, I still want to be a venue manager. Long story short, I went to the other place, got my education of being a venue manager, and then got my very first nightclub of my own, where I was the manager. Nobody above me. Of course, we had a regional manager, but I was the manager, the guy there. And I'm telling you this story now because I would not have been any of that. None of that would have been happening for me as a person without influences on YouTube. I don't think the pill from the doctor would have done anything. Maybe it would have even made it worse because numbing emotions might not be the right path for anything really. So without a certain group of people online, I think one of them called Alpha M, Aaron Marino, shout out. Angry Picnic, one of some of the other guys who did random stuff. Charisma on Command. A lot of these influencers who had genuinely great ideas and were filling a gap, at least in my life, those were the ones forming who I became. So I rebuilt myself that way. If that didn't happen, I would not have been a venue manager, which means that all the people I have worked with since then would not have had me as a leader. And I believe that I have helped a lot of people become a little bit more self-aware and a little bit more confident in their life through my own experiences. And this is all well and fair. It's a nice segue into what I actually want to talk about today, which is a Netflix documentary called The Manosphere. I watched The Manosphere when it came out, and I rewatched it again just the other day just to get it refreshed in my memory. Because I have followed a huge amount of guys, online influencers, coaches, you name it. I've been watching their videos. And a lot of them has, throughout the entire thing, been very motivating and very helpful. Some of them have changed in the way they've done things. And I think maybe about when we had the COVID-19, the lockdown and everything, a lot of things changed again because people were home, people were depressed, they couldn't be social, which human beings need. And I think the influencers and the influence marketing business itself evolved in that way. At the same time, the feminist and the woke culture woke up. And I think that kind of movement, along the opportune thing happening for women, that they now have more options, more opportunities, equal rights, which they should. All of this, it changes what it means to be a man. Because if everybody is equal nowadays, at least in terms of how we are valued, what does that mean for the man who was supposed to be the protector and the provider in the past? And all of this combined into one part of fuck up has changed how social media works, how human beings work. And if you're a young man today and you don't know how it is to be a man, what it means to be a man, and you do as I did, go online, you might find different influences than I did. And then they made the Manosphere documentary. So the Manosphere, just to break that down, it's the word that describes this atmosphere for young adults, young men from, I think it's all the way down to maybe 12 or 13 years and up until I'm 29 and I still watch it. So like a large portion of people, of young men, looking at these influences. And if the message is how to get confidence, how to get more energy, a purpose in life, I find that very helpful. I think that's beautiful that we can help people in that way. That's what I want to do myself. But if the message is to contradict feminism and the wokeness around us by being misogynistic, by hating women or demeaning women or other people in general, I think that's a shame that that's where we are headed. And unfortunately, that is where a lot of these influencers are headed and have been heading for quite some time. So I saw the Manosphere, the documentary, and I already knew before watching it that this might be dangerous. Because usually when people document a certain thing, it is from one point of view. Which means that if I go into a certain venue or a certain store and I already hate it, my documentary about that place won't be positive. So I thought to myself, okay, if male influencers and the manosphere itself is already looked at negatively, this documentary is not going to do it any better. And I was afraid of that because there are a need for some influencers out there to actually help these young men. But if we only see it through the lens of negativity, of toxic masculinity, whatever that is, then we might take away this option for the young men to actually get help from whoever is online, the uncle they never had or the dad they never had, the big brother who could help them. So I watched the documentary. And I want to say, first of all, that the people portrayed in that documentary are maybe also some of the most extreme scenarios. I don't even remember most of their names right now, but I recognize some of them as being the influencers I saw 10 years ago, 5 years ago, who I was actually looking up to. And now they changed their way of working and the message they are providing to be very extreme. And they also dive into different aspects of life. Like all of a sudden, what was once influencing people online is now politics. And if you are 14 years old and you have no father figure, you don't know what it means to be a man today because you're taught all the way that women and men are the same, which I find to be bullshit. But if that's what you're taught and you don't get any other perspective or you don't get any explanation of what that means, and then you go online to see this rich guy who drives a Lamborghini, who has all these women in their bikinis looking great, you want his life, right? So if you look up to this guy and he says, you need to be misogynistic, women belong in the kitchen, they shouldn't have voting rights, whatever they may say, these guys, and you don't have any other thing to counter that, of course you're going to get colored by that. It's literally propaganda. Back in the days, propaganda was used for, obviously, other things. Now it's kind of used for these kind of things. And if you watched The Social Dilemma, which is another documentary on Netflix, I highly recommend watching both The Social Dilemma and The Manosphere. If you watch that one, you already know how dangerous social media and the internet in general is to the human mind, indeed to the younger population. Because if you are brought up where being online is the primary way to connect, which it is now, and then in person is a secondary way, then that means that your most influential person is not your mom or your dad anymore. And it's not your best friend. It's whoever is on your feed that you just scroll through. And if that feed sees that you looked at this video for a certain amount of time, they're not going to recommend you something that is contradicting that. You're going to see another video from some other guy saying the exact same thing. And if you've seen that video from 12 different guys 50 times by scrolling, that's now your belief. And that's the scary thing, that if you go online and you search in Google, the earth is, it might suggest you round, everybody else is stupid. But it might suggest me, the earth is flat. Based on what I have searched somewhere else, what music I listen to, what pictures I save on Pinterest, or where I am geographically. Because indeed in the States I've read that if you're from this state, you tend to believe this. Therefore, we will serve you this answer. Just to say it out there, I don't believe the earth is flat. However, it is scary nowadays that the truth is objectively different from person to person. If we cannot agree with what the truth is, how are we supposed to actually help certain things? And we saw this develop in the COVID lockdown again. All of a sudden, people were talking about whether you need the mask or you don't need the mask. The virus is made by the state, or if you eat this certain breakfast, you won't have the, all of a sudden there was all this misinformation. And you know as well as I do that clickbait is a real thing. If you make a headline for an article that just sounds better than it actually is, people will read it more often and you'll get paid more. That's unfortunately how the world works. So imagine that scenario times 3 billion people on the planet looking for it, divided into two different groups of people based on your values and your opinions, saying about the other group something irradical, like the other ones are trying to force some kind of fake news down your throat, and the world is run by the devil, and if you do cover half your face, you are worshipping the, whatever it is. Imagine you seeing all that, and then somebody says something else to you. No, that's not true. Now immediately you hate that guy. Because more than anything else, of course we can bond about liking the same football team, but we do bond even more about how ugly we find that plant or whatever it is. Hatred is something that we bond towards. And if that is taken advantage of, as it is right now, the planet and the population and everything just goes complete into chaos, which is happening all around the world now. So I watched the Manosphere, and the documentary is great. I like the guy who made it, Louis Theroux, I think his name is. It is very one point of view-ish. I think it has a successful way of being in the way that it portrays how toxic it can be, how dangerous it can be. These guys that are portrayed in the documentary are also, in my opinion, some of the most extreme you find. However, this documentary only talks about that. It only talks about whether these beliefs are correct to have, whether they are dangerous for the younger generation, which they might be. I agree on that point of view. But the documentary only talks about it. It's only interested in making these guys look as dangerous as possible. Now, whose fault is it that we have arrived at this place in time today? I saw on the other documentary people asking this question: who is responsible? And people had different answers. It is the government, it is the people behind Facebook, it is whatever. And my opinion is like, who fucking cares who is responsible for how we got here? We can talk about, let's blame that guy and then move on. But what does that help? Instead, another example is that in Denmark, they are talking about banning smartphones in elementary schools so that the students are more social and they are less scrolling, which I agree upon. That'd be nice if we can get there. But banning the thing that gets in the way might not be the right thing. The more I was told not to drink, the more I had, kind of the feeling I wanted to drink, right? And I think banning it is just making an enemy out of the social media and out of the smartphone, which we don't want to make it because it's going to be here forever. Instead, what I think we need to do is educate people. This podcast, for instance, is just to talk about stuff that we are not supposed to talk about because it's dangerous or we are stepping on someone's toes, or if I say this, I might lose a follower or a friend will disagree with me, or all of these reasons not to do it, we just have to throw out the window. We don't need to be friends with everybody, but we don't need to be rude to someone just to be rude either. But we need to talk. And I think the first step to work on any of this is to be able to debate people, converse with people. And I think we should do this already in the elementary school. Before people, young men and women, get a smartphone in their hand, they need to be taught what a smartphone is and what it isn't. They need to know what a like is and what it isn't. Because right when they made the like button, they intended it to be, a positive thing. I like your picture. That's nice. But now we see it as, oh, I only got 10 likes. That means that the rest of the 8 billion people on Earth don't like me. That's how our brain works. And that's not necessarily what they wanted to do, but that is what it is doing right now. And we need to talk with people about this. I think we should make classes in elementary school and high school and whatever, where we are allowed to debate political views, religional views, social media influences, everything. Because avoiding it will only make it more dangerous when we eventually open the can of worms, which it will be when you get out to the actual world. Right now, we are afraid to say that how many genders there are. We are afraid to say that if you transition from being a man into a woman, my point of view is XYZ. All of these things we're scared to say because it might cost me a relation, it might cost me a job, it might cost me whatever in the future. Kevin Hart lost out on hosting the Oscars because he, 8 years before that, made a post on Twitter saying that if his son was gay, he would break a dollhouse over his head, which it's a joke. It's a funny joke in my opinion. It doesn't mean that Kevin Hart is homophobic, but because someone got offended, he now needs to step down. That means that all these freedom of speech just goes out the window. Instead, how about we ask Kevin, Mr. Hart, do you really mean that if you're gay, you should be beaten? And then he could say, of course not. If we ask questions instead of just judge people based on something we don't know if they still mean or actually meant literally, something they said several years ago, if we just judge based on that, how are we supposed to grow as a species, as society, or as individuals? So I think the answer, which is very vague, but it's also big and it can be implemented everywhere, is to talk about it. Communication is key to so many things. And it starts with your parents, like from a kid to a parent, and from the parent even more to the kid. Talk about all these hard, difficult topics so that the kid already knows something when it comes to school and gets the interaction with the smartphone or the smart board where it also starts or whatever it is. And then whenever somebody has a feeling of something, hey, today I was taught that there are 72 genders, you now know as the kid coming to the parent, we can talk about this because we talked about something else yesterday. Instead, now you're being told, shush, we don't speak about this. Because you might make Kenneth angry or whatever, or you might hurt Kenneth's feelings. And I'd say if we hurt someone's feelings, I had this happening to me actually a few days back. I was sitting with a few friends and somebody who I knew through the other friends. And I made a joke. My humor is dark as fuck. I made a joke and it was clearly from my point of view a joke and it was intended to be funny. And I made a joke about Asian people and about the eyes. I'm not going to do it here. And the person got offended. And I asked, what happened? Why are you mad at me now? And he said, yeah, well, you made the joke about Asian people's looks and I don't find that funny. I find that offensive. Okay, but why? Because that was not my intent to offend you. Well, it's because I've been treated this way before. I've had this happen before. Okay. Well, I didn't know that. Of course, I could also read the room a bit more. I'm not saying it's not on my shoes. It is. But if we talk about it, then you can ask me, did you really mean to offend me when you said that? And I can say, oh God, no. I tried to be funny. And if we don't do this, luckily he and I did, just spoke about it. But if we don't do this, everything is offensive. How can we talk about anything today without someone saying, I find that offensive, we can't talk about that? We can't, because social media just explode. And I think that's the problem with the Manosphere as well. Because one person have an opinion doesn't mean that that's the opinion of a certain group. But if you go online and you state that opinion and you get 100 likes, that might make you believe there's 100 people with the same point of view. Maybe the people just liked your statement because they like who you are as a person. They like your new shoes. Maybe they want to fuck you. A lot of different reasons to like someone's post. If we add in the controversy about whether everybody online is actually a person nowadays, or if it's AI, robots, or someone having 10 different profiles, then how are we supposed to know, once again, what the truth is? And if we don't know what the truth is, how are we supposed to do anything about this circumstance? One way, ask questions. Now, the Manosphere. They are playing it in the documentary as if all of the people in the Manosphere are saying it's men against women. And women have to belong in the kitchen, and they are the dishwashers, and they shouldn't have voting rights. They are talking about whether monogamy should be both ways, or if the men can have multiple partners. And I'm just saying all of those topics have to be handled individually from person to person. You cannot take the entirety of the Manosphere and say everybody who is a part of this believes this, which is too simple. And that's unfortunately a little bit how this documentary portrays the Manosphere itself. I'm not saying I would know how to make a documentary better. However, I'm just saying that maybe if we actually talked with other people, psychiatrists, or Tony Robbins is a great example, about how we can actually influence the youth, the next generation, whatever, then we could have points from both points of view that we can then, match up or have a great debate. We lose when we can't talk to each other. And that's the idea about this entire podcast we're doing right now. So that's a little bit introductory to what the podcast will be about in the future. It's also a little introductory to the Manosphere and why it's important for me to talk about all of this with my history. If any of what I've said so far is hitting a button within you, if you're relating to some of it, if you have opinions, please state them in the commentary or reach out to me. If you have an idea of who I can talk to get more knowledge for myself, but also to talk about this debate in any way, psychology, the Manosphere, it can be education, whatever it is. If you have someone you think I need to bring on here, reach out to me because I'm open to do a lot of things within this media. Otherwise, I'm happy you've listened so far. I hope to see you again the next time. Hit the like and subscribe. I'll see you. Thank you.
It's for everybody trying to change the destination. It's for everybody trying to make a better way. For the ones that came before me, no, they paved the way to the Hall of Fame. My name on it. If you want it, you gon' have to put that work in. Push your body to the